Right, thanks for staying with us this evening on After Dark. I'm Nic Pegg. Joining me on the line is Christchurch architect Bob Burnett. Good evening, Bob. How are you?
Hi, Nick. Yeah,
Good.
really good.
You've been in the news quite a bit recently, and there have been awards and all sorts of things happening. Let's kick off
Yep.
with something really positive. A colleague of yours has just been awarded for their boat shed house over in Littleton. Can you tell us a bit about the design and what was recognised there?
Yeah, sure. So, Julie Villard, she's a French architect, and we're both members of AD&Z. She worked for me. At the time, she designed her own house for her and her partner, Eddie. And, it's a compact home. It took out the residential under 150 square metres compact home category in the AD&Z Awards. So she's pretty stoked, and I also picked up commended for a medium-sized home in Mirabel, which it's always good. It gets more and more difficult with the quality of the awards. The entries getting better each year on year. They seem to get better and better.
Now, unfortunately, we haven't been able to find the picture of the actual boat shed house. It's a splendid looking building there, and apparently they've achieved a lot for such a confined space. I mean, it's only 150 squares, isn't it?
It's less than that, so it's probably about 110, I think.
Okay.
But it's on two levels, and it feels quite spacious because it's got a high ceiling.
Okay,
And
tell us.
I think.
Sorry, tell us about the super home concept.
Sure, yeah. So, Super Home Movement, it's really a open source sort of group for sharing ideas and it's for architects, designers, builders, subbies, suppliers, sort of right across the industry. And started in Christchurch. I started the Super Home Movement after completing a project that was the first 10 home star rated home in New Zealand. It's around about sort of almost coming up 4 years ago now. And that kind of got quite a lot of press, and we used that momentum to launch the Super Home Movement. And basically the idea is to raise the standards because we've got a really ridiculously low building code standard which isn't really fit for purpose in New Zealand.
What still?
Yeah. So, building code in New Zealand, just in terms of, particularly in terms of sustainability and energy efficiency and that sort of thing, it's about 20 years behind most other OECD countries. And it hasn't changed for many years. Around the world, building codes are renewed every sort of year or two, but here it's basically been left alone, and successive governments have really been asleep at the wheel.
Do I get the feeling, Bob, that you've gone and practiced overseas and then you've come back to New Zealand and you've drawn these conclusions?
No, but I guess Julie being French, and she was working in Switzerland before she came over here, and so she would say she's learned everything she knows from me and been mentored by me, but I think it's probably quite the opposite. So this particular house that got the award, it's a very European house in its construction methods. And I think we kind of suffer in New Zealand. We're sort of putting up with really low quality homes. Even new homes can have single digit temperatures in the bedrooms, and it's ridiculous.
I heard the other day about some of the components, like the cladding and the wood, only has a design life of 15 years for new homes.
Yeah, so that's pretty pathetic, really, isn't it? And,
well, if you're paying $500,000 for a pretty average home, you'd think it's going to last a bit longer than 15 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And the entire life of the building under the building code is 50 years. So I think a new home that you're putting your life savings into should last for 100 years or 200 years.
Oh, so obviously you've tried to do something about this, haven't you, in a big way?
Yeah, well, we just decided that we're not going to wait for the code to change, and it's not fit for purpose. And even if it does change, it's probably going to be small incremental changes and not be the sort of huge sea change that it needs to be. And our insulation values, for example, are about a third of California, and California doesn't get as cold.
It's a warm country. I've been there. Yeah. It's gorgeous. Yeah. Now, there's been, in fact, one of the reasons you came to my attention, there's been a lot of comment about the standard of insulation in council properties, and I believe you actually went to one or to a group of buildings to have a look at them. What were your findings?
Yeah, I got a call from a journalist from Radio New Zealand, and they asked me to come and give them my opinion about those. And they're pretty appalling. And across the city, I guess there's lots of homes that are well below what the standard should be for people to put up with, and people should be living in, and not healthy at all. In some ways, some of the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s buildings are even worse than the old timber villas. At least the old timber villas, they are drafty, but at least they weren't sort of as mouldy and damp because they sort of breathe. And, they're good materials, good native timber and stuff like that, rather than cheap materials that started to sort of crop up.
Now, the council is saying that they can't afford to insulate these homes. Now, they had until, as a landlord, because they are a landlord, they had until, last month to get this sorted out. It's not been done. It seems to me that if it's impracticable to insulate these buildings, they actually should be tearing them down and rebuilding.
Yep. Yeah, you'd think so. There's a lot that you can do to renovate a home, but it becomes a matter of, is it financially viable to do that? And in a lot of cases it is, but it takes deep, drastic measures really, and sort of a careful analysis of what's there, and then a plan to sort of a strategy to fix it over time, and a deep retrofit strategy that looks at kind of a pathway towards making it better. Because doing one thing, like chucking some extra insulation in the roof and maybe under the floor if you can, it's kind of too piecemeal, and it's in some cases it might even cause new problems. Like if you upgrade the insulation, you really need to think about ventilation. You really need to think about moisture and what's happening, and upgrading the air membranes and things like that in a building. If you're going to upgrade the insulation, otherwise you could end up with what's called interstitial condensation. So that just basically means you're getting condensation inside the construction, inside the walls, or inside the roof. And it's not that simple. I think.
Can I just interrupt there, Bob? New builds. I know of a particular case in a new build where the house is so airtight it can't breathe, and these houses were not put onto the market with an HRV system. So you've got double glazing. There's no movement of air. So you've actually got condensation on the windows and dampness problems because there was no HRV as standard in a $500,000 home. What the hell's going on there?
Yeah, well, it's just because there's no requirement in the New Zealand Building Code for ventilation.
So it comes back to the code that you were talking about, yeah.
Yeah. So I've got an old villa myself, and I've been trying to fix that up. And one of the first things I did was put a proper ventilation system in it. Even though it's not airtight, that helped a lot with getting rid of the moisture and dealing with the condensation issue. Still cold, but at least it's not damp.
Do you think the council were throwing their hands up in the air and going, "Oh, we're $34 million short," because they're looking to the government to invest in social housing and get them to pay for it?
I don't know. I don't think they've looked at it in enough detail, and I think maybe they've probably had a lot of time to think about this, and they're doing it at the last minute, and they're just saying, well, here's a loophole in the legislation we can get out of insulating these units because we can just say it's not practicable. But my view is anything can be done. It just needs the right amount of investment, and so those units, just at a quick sort of look over them, I think there's a lot that can be done to fix the problems there. It's just going to take a significant investment to do that.
Well, Bob Burnett, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Best of luck with the super home movement, and we look forward to talking to you again in the near future.
Thank you, Nick.
Cheers and good night to you.